Welcome to the podcast series from the College of Education and Integrative Studies. I'm Jeff Pass, the Dean of the College, and we're at Cal Poly Pomona, and we have three guests today. Today we're going to be talking about Credentials program and specifically the Single Subjects program. And as our special guest, we have Dr. Dave Neumann. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you.
Would you like to introduce our two alums that are joined with us today?
Well, I'll let them introduce themselves further, but to my right immediately is Jeanette.
I'm Jeanette.
And I'm Roxanne.
And Jeanette and Roxanne are recent graduates of our program. And we're going to start with you, Dave, and tell us, what is single subjects? What does that encompass?
Single subject is discipline-specific training for teachers. So there's multiple subject, which is elementary school education. Those are the teachers who typically from K to 5, although they're credentialed K through 8, have their own standalone classrooms and are responsible for all subjects. Single subject, by contrast, is those who specialize in one particular subject and are credentialed from middle school through high school, so grades 6 through 12, and specialize in one particular subject area. And the whole notion of a single subject credential program is that the pedagogical strategies and methods for teaching a discipline are distinctive to that discipline, that they aren't simply generic strategies.
Okay. So Jeanette, what did you study?
I decided to go into arts as a credential program because I earned my master's degree a few years back, and I wanted to teach. And during the time when I earned my master's, I did not know that I needed to get a credential. I completed my bachelor's degree here, so I decided to come back in and get through the program here because I had heard really amazing things, and I knew teachers who had completed the program. So this is why I came in.
Did you study art?
Yes, I did. I studied art. My credential is also in art.
Okay. So you graduated with an art degree, and then you realized that you needed some kind of credential. You thought you could just teach on the basis of your BA in art.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. I had the same thing happen to me when I was a secondary teacher, and I thought I could just teach elementary, and I found out, no, you have to be specially trained to teach elementary. And Roxanne, what is it that you studied?
I studied dance. I actually graduated from Cal State Long Beach, and I got my BA in dance. And I knew I wanted to teach at that time, although previously people had told me to go into teaching, and I was like, I can't do it. No, I don't want to do that. I can't do that. And once, I always had directors and people telling me, here, go teach the lesson, go teach this, go teach that. And always with that interaction of pushing me to take more leadership in that role of either directing or assisting or doing choreography. And that's where I was like, why am I doing this for free, basically? And then I was like, okay, what if I do this for a 9 to 5? And that's kind of what made me think, oh, I should just get my BA in dance and then be a teacher.
Teacher. So instead of 9 to 5, 8 to 4.
Well, earlier than that and later than that, in reality.
Right. Much later than that. And so, Dave, what is the assortment of subject areas that we prepare teachers for at Cal Poly Pomona?
So there's the kind of core areas that you would think of immediately, so math, science, English language arts, and history. But then there are also the areas like the arts. And given that we are a polytechnic ag school, there's also a credential in agriculture. So those are few and far between, but we do have a few of those. Those are the main areas. And
how does it sort out? Are most of the students in English and math?
That's a good question off the top of my head. That sounds about right. English and math, kind of what you would expect, and then science and history going down from there. And typically, I would say just 1 or 2 art students at a time, usually.
So 1 or 2 arts, and then how many dance?
There is none for dance. California does not have a credential for dance. We're one of the few states that don't. So we have to go the PE route. So I'm credentialed for PE.
Oh, so if you wanted to teach PE, you're qualified to do that. Mm-hmm. So what's involved in learning to be an art teacher?
For me, it really was structure and kind of learning the basics and the psychology behind teaching an art. I think that's what the whole program was composed for me. I also needed to learn about classroom management. And then I think other than like the classroom management, it was more like how to handle children. As far as taking art classes, that really wasn't part of the program. This was more about how to manage and be a leader in the classroom.
So you had to study children,
psychology, classroom management, different
lesson
types,
planning,
disabilities that I can deal with children, just all kinds of scenarios, how to handle the public, parents, how to reach out through like email or letters, phone calls, those kind of things, like the real work.
I think one of the things that I always took away, and just because now we're talking about like what we got out of the program, is it was really about how do we nurture our community? How do we find the community? How do we serve them better? What are the different strategies and skills that we need as educators to be cognizant of maybe their background, home life, the demographics of the students that we're dealing with.
True.
Yeah.
So this isn't what most people think about when they think about teacher training program or teacher preparation program. And is that by design, Dave?
Yes, I mean, I think it reflects the really complex landscape of teaching in this day and age, that there are a lot of expectations and responsibilities that teachers serve their students and their students' parents and the communities in much larger ways than just sort of delivering instruction in the way that I think that's typically depicted by people who don't really know education from the inside.
Right. And so you wanting to be an art teacher, you said, well, I know a lot about art.
Right.
I guess I could just go and do that. But you learned a lot along the way.
Yes.
Was it over how long a period of time did you?
I took exactly 2 years. In fact, I completed the program a while ago, but I had difficulty with the CSET. So that kind of held me back.
And the CSET, for those who are unfamiliar, is?
That is the test, the examination for the subject specific. And there are several depending on the discipline or the subject that the teacher is going to teach.
So you had to take a test in art knowledge and teaching art techniques, and it was a challenging test.
That was a very challenging test. But again, it also forced me to revisit a lot of the information that I knew for the discipline itself and relearn it. And that, in fact, has helped me now in the classroom. So all of the things that I had to study for are now handy in my classroom because I had to refresh and learn about ceramics, for example. My discipline was mainly in painting and drawing. So
one of the things that people don't realize is that teaching art is not just handing out crayons.
Right, not at all.
No.
There are lots of elements of art. You mentioned ceramics. What are some of the other elements that you had to?
Printmaking.
I was going to say,
printing,
did you do printmaking?
We were doing printmaking. I took a printmaking class in like community college. So having to learn it again to teach it was just a challenge in itself. It's a great challenge. It's made me a better teacher, I feel. But yes, there's a lot that I had to revisit to be able to execute what I know to the children.
So there was printmaking, there's ceramics, there's drawing.
Graphic design. Like things as basic as composition, like the elements of art, principles of design, a lot.
Did art history factor in?
A lot, yes. A lot of art history. Revisiting the textbooks that I have from undergrad to remember dates and artists that are relevant to the lesson I'm teaching. I always try to begin with art history, and then I continue teaching my lessons based on that.
Why do you start with art history?
Because I'd like to show them like the work that the masters have completed and teach them how it's relevant to what they're learning today.
And you find that to be effective?
It's very effective.
It motivates the students to learn more about it.
It's the foundation, yes.
Uh-huh. And have you ever tried to do it in the reverse?
Have I tried? Yes. I find, though, that if I show students work from before, it inspires more ideas than if I let them work on something and then bring them back to show them what others have done. So I think art history comes first. So
it sounds to me like part of what you've done is learning how to think like a teacher.
Yes.
Yes.
All the way, yes. That's 100% correct.
And is that something by design also in the single subjects program that we're developing thoughtful reflection? Sure,
absolutely. I think there are certain words that end up sounding like jargon in education programs. Metacognition is one of them, and we often talk about that with respect to helping students develop metacognition. That is a self-reflectiveness or an understanding about how they learn. But equally, if not more important, is teachers themselves developing that kind of metacognition to be reflective about why they engage in the kinds of planning and instruction they do, and then equally important to reflect on how teaching went and how to make it better next time. So I always emphasize in the classes I teach a kind of apprenticeship model that we think about education as a trajectory toward excellence that will take 3, 5, 7 years before you really reach your full skill level, and only if you continue to really reflect and grow and learn.
So we can teach our credential students to have the basic knowledge that they need in their content area, but learn how to think like a teacher so that when new problems come along, new challenges come along, you can't just rely on some little trick or method, but you have to be able to think through it in an effective way.
Right, absolutely.
So let's talk about your trajectory in dance. So you had to learn physical education.
Yes. Well,
and that was challenging?
Very challenging because the approach and the expectations, I think, are different. So for PE, they really are structuring it for ways of assessment are the physical domain, the cognitive domain, and the locomotor domain. So the way that we create our lessons are very much around including all of those and then making any modifications that we need to our students that are included in the environment, such as students that have ADHD, or how can we make our environment inclusive. So it's really about, okay, so I have this group of students that can, this group of students that can't. What is the one activity that everybody can do, and how can I effectively assess them in one or two of those domains, right?
So you'll excuse me for saying teaching PE isn't just rolling out the balls and saying,
no,
have fun on the playground.
Yeah, no. And I think that that's one of the biggest misconceptions. But also for dance, being a dance educator, we also, even in the physical education world, it's very much like set aside, oh, you're a dancer. Oh, you just dance around all day. And it's like, no, we don't just dance around all day. There's so much work that's involved with it because there's a lot of critical thinking. There's a lot of preparation, trying to prepare the students to make choices. And one of the ways that you have to first time give them the tools, such as like for composition, what is the approach that the choreographer made? What were the choices that they made? With the intention that they created this dance on, on this stage, if their intention was to create like this harsh movement or to create this specific dynamic, what did you see? What were they doing? What choice did the choreographer make? So it's very analytical. And then you look at the lighting design and you look at maybe the way that they placed people out on stage. It's very intentional. And it's to create this environment that we want the audience to walk away with.
Can I interject one more piece?
Yeah.
Because I know this from the presentation that she did in our class. So like Jeanette, there's also another element that you'll appreciate as a social studies person, and that's the history and culture element. So in the class that Roxanne was in with me, she did a presentation on Afro-Cuban dance as her model lesson for her students. And so the first portion of it was about why is there such a thing as Afro-Cuban dance?
Yeah, like what's the purpose? What's the reason? Like, why is it important for us to learn these different dance styles? And for me, just culturally, when you look at the diversity that we have in California, I think that the number one thing is to look at all of our students and show them how beautiful they are, right? And the number one thing is to look at them and say, oh, you're from here, and every single one has a different cultural element that's captivating and mesmerizing and beautiful. And the first thing to do is, like, especially in high school, they're still kind of creating their own identity, like who they are in this bigger world. So developing that connection to like maybe historic or ancestry really gives them that a little bit more of a boost of like who I am is okay. Yeah. And maybe my family is this, or maybe my background is this, but you know what? It's okay.
And we both have the same.
Yes, they find out that every body has some kind of ethnic identity.
Yes, and to break down those barriers of like, there's all of a sudden, all of our differences are not so taboo. And that's kind of what makes the community in the classroom so much more appreciative and
So it's not only
open.
not taboo, it should be celebrated.
Exactly, it's all about celebration.
We worked together a lot throughout the program.
Yeah,
I think when we had classes, we would just
because you're both artists.
Yes.
Yes.
And I appreciate everything she says because we've had these intensive conversations of how, the space and how it's designed. And then when we were given the opportunity to do lesson plans together, we always had a solid foundation, which was all about like arts and community and the children and performance and what are they doing. And
so you're also exploring ethnic identity through art. So tell us some of the ways that you would do that.
Well, for example, we're having like a holiday, a Hispanic recognized holiday in the next few days, and I'm teaching classes where students need to understand culture. Every time there's an opportunity, we do projects based on that. So
the upcoming holiday is the Day of the Dead.
Yes.
And how are you addressing it through art?
Well, like children, for example, they're going to be researching the culture. We have videos that go along with it. Then they're going to be bringing food that's relevant to that. A lot of the children in my classes, a good percentage of them have that culture, that background. And I feel like recently there was a Disney movie that came out. I'm sure you've heard of it, Coco.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the kids requested to see it. And to be honest, I don't think I knew as much about the culture myself until I saw that movie. And then now I'm thinking I need to bring this into the classroom because I need everyone to understand what it's about. And every time there's an opportunity for culture, we need to bring this in. This is important. We're kind of losing, or the history is fading now, I feel. At least in culture.
Well, so I also dance in a dance company, and it's a Mexican folk dance company. And in this dance company, Day of the Dead, when this past weekend, they had like 8 shows. Like, it's just like one show after the next one after the next one. So if you go into LA, there's a lot of events that are going on there's a lot of things that are happening in Pomona. So I do think that a lot of people have been on board to celebrating it, but really finding the deeper meaning into how it's connecting to the people, right? Because it is really about celebration of bringing families together and acknowledging the history or the past and those that have gone and not forgetting them. That's the basic principle of like all of the things that we do, like community, bring them together, how we can celebrate each other.
So let's come back to your role as a teacher, because you're not just a dance teacher, you're a physical education teacher.
Right.
So what kinds of lessons would you be expected to prepare in the course of a day, because you're dealing with multiple grade levels?
Yes.
And each one has a different curricular goal?
Well, they build on each other. As state standards, they do build on each other. So like the first ones, if it's 6th grade that I'm teaching, the first one is to introduce them to the dual activities, but it's really about...
dual activities, you mean?
So teams, like having them play against teams, like soccer teams.
Okay.
Right. But the first thing is really getting them to understand, developing the skills that they need. So tossing, throwing, overhand throws and stuff like that, kicking and swinging, all of those different locomotor skills.
And you had to study kinesiology.
No.
You did not.
That's one of the things that was very different about my whole path, because my dance program prepared me enough. I had to pass all of my CSETs the same way that she did. And my dance program prepared me enough. All I had to do was look at the CSET expectations, and I studied it, and I was able to fulfill the requirements.
Through your knowledge of dance.
Through my knowledge of dance, even though none of it was based on dance.
But
none of the curriculum was based on dance that was expected during the CSETs. Yeah,
but
it was
yet
all
there was
PE.
tremendous overlap.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you had to deal with standards. You have to deal with standards also.
Yes.
You study them.
Yes.
To figure out what each grade level or each class needs. And what do we do to prepare students for the standards?
Well, each discipline has its own single subject methods course. And so the methods course is just for PE or dance or history majors, that sort of thing.
Well, not dance, because we don't have dance.
No, they stick us with PE, so we're
PE.
there with the PE. It's good.
Good. Right. So in most discipline areas, there's a single subject methods course, and a good portion of that course is helping students understand what the state requires of them in standards and/or framework, and then how to teach in a discipline-specific setting. How do you teach history in particular? How do you teach art in particular?
When you're planning your lessons, you start off with the standard, or is there some other pattern that you follow in figuring out what to teach?
For me, yes, I have all 3. I teach 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade, and I have each one printed, a small little pack. But, every time I teach a lesson, in classes where I have 2 groups, 7th and 8th graders, I'll look to see which of the 2 connect, and then I'll base the lesson on that. If I feel like 7th grade isn't really addressing the standards, I will make sure that I will bring in certain elements of the standards to make sure that everything is covered.
And same with you?
No.
Okay.
I wish. No. So for me, what I do is I kind of go backwards and I look at what is the bigger picture that I want to do if I'm talking about a unit, which is something that I took away from Dr. Neumann's classes. What is the bigger picture that I want to take away? And the standards also need to be fitting with that, in alignment with everything. And then I have to look at some of the other extra standards, like, okay, am I including my ELA standards? Am I including
ELA meaning?
the English Language Arts, right, acquisition? And then also the ELL, and then making sure that I'm including.
And that's English language learners, those who don't speak English as a first language.
Yes.
And can I just note that, that some standards are structured differently. So art and PE are distinctive in the sense that they are very skills oriented, whereas other sets of standards are much more sequential. It's really clear. You follow the standards and they more or less align to a curriculum. You guys have the bigger challenge, I think, of taking larger skills and then trying to weave them together into instruction. So there's more freedom, and then that's both a blessing and a curse sometimes.
Yeah.
Do you collaborate with the other teachers at that grade level in designing your lessons and units?
With me, I have the only other teacher that teaches art is another middle school teacher who I speak to occasionally. But I currently have a mentor teacher, the person who's helping me with the induction program. She's the person that guides me the most.
So you have somebody who you talk to, who you confer with,
yes,
who gives you advice.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And you?
As a substitute, I haven't gotten there yet, but I am in the process of getting hired at an art school. And now at this art school, they really encourage us to collaborate with the other arts. So what that would look like is, so we have a music department. How can I include the music department to creating this compositional dance for the spring concert? Or, how can I include some of the theatrical elements into what we're doing for dance? Or for visual arts, how can I use some of the things that they're doing in their classes as maybe a projection and have that be part of the element or the environment that we're creating? Or maybe I can give them an extra challenge into developing some kind of prop work that can be part of the whole scenario right on stage. So it's really painting the picture, and once you have an idea or an intention of what you're trying to do, and looking at, of course, your standards, what you can fit into what you're trying to do with the dances, and you say, okay, this is the bigger picture that I want my students to walk away with, this is the composition that they should be learning, and these are the techniques that they need to be doing at the same time. And then all of that kind of just branches out to collaboration with other teachers as well.
Okay. So anybody who's watching this who thought teaching is easy and teaching art and PE or dance is even easier, they're going to have to change their minds. So I'm going to add in a new element here, in that we are responsible for educating children with disabilities.
Right. And
there's no single disability. You could have anybody from
there's a wide range.
A physical disability to somebody mentioned ADD, autistic, children with autism, children with hearing or vision deficits.
Right.
How do you do that?
That is a really difficult question. Well, in my case, my students, a lot of the students, we have 3 electives on campus. It is dancing, singing, and art. And a lot of the students are kind of taken away. If they have any type of disability, they typically end up in my classroom. And I can have maybe about half the population challenged in some way. It could be visual, it could be anything. And how I deal with it, it really is studying their IEPs, determining what the best...
IEPs is their individual education plan,
yes,
which they're required to do by federal law.
Right.
Each child with a disability has to have some kind of plan.
Yes.
And we measure how well we're doing.
And as a teacher, we need to know which students hold those records and what we need to do and what the plan of action is. And I feel like the program here really prepared us for that.
Yeah.
There is one specific class I took where we had to do some observation hours. And I think that's when I really learned and was able to see what the real true challenge is out there. Not just like the theoretical or, what you hear about. It really was an observation of the classrooms to see how teachers handle this.
And what did you see?
Well, the real truth, what teachers really deal with, the challenges, in one situation, the professor had us sit through an individualized plan where parents were in, principal was in, teachers, and they all discussed the students' progress. So when I was given the opportunity to walk into one as a teacher, I felt like I knew what I needed to say, how I needed to be prepared. And that is something that Cal Poly's program, the professors here, really helped us with.
And how about you with the same thing?
It's the same thing, except for what makes it with physical education. We do get students that don't really well, how do I say this? They do have certain level of physical disabilities or cognitive disability, and they are integrated in the classroom. But there are other students, select students, to where they might need specialized physical education. And in that instance, they are required to go to an adapted physical education class.
So they go to a specialist
for that. Mm-hmm. And that's all dependent on what is needed by the IEPs. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It sounds like a really hard job. Did you get scared, like, oh my gosh, I won't be able to do this? Or did you have confidence?
Confidence.
Both. Like, there are times where I feel like, I don't know if I can do this. And there's other times where I'm like, oh, I totally can do this. It just depends on the students, because I'm a sub, right? What the students I have, and looking at the classroom. And a lot of it is the culture of the classroom, right? With the culture that's already been developed by the previous teacher or the teacher that's in the standing teacher. Sometimes it can get out of hand, and sometimes everything flows exactly as needed. So
in your preparation, in your internship, your practicum, you had to learn about a lot of students at once, because both of you don't just have 30 students or even 4 classes. You see the whole school.
Yes.
How do you get to know your students?
I like to use like more of a survey the first few days, kind of casual. I think just having them talk about themselves and learning where they come from and understanding more or less their flow, the way that they deal with each other and with me. And then from there, kind of determining how the classroom will be set up and what their interests are, so that I can develop lessons based on that.
I think that was the approach that I took as well for one of my schools that I was sent to. And that was very helpful and intuitive. Like, I was able to gather a lot of information about my students, which is very important. With the other school, I didn't do that. And all we did was play games. And throughout the course of the games, I would go and engage one-on-one with the smaller groups. And I think that was also just as effective. And you keep dibs on like who's doing what, who's able to do certain things, who's not able to do certain things, who's going to need extra help, who are the ones that like to talk out of turn. We always have those students as well.
Well, we have them at the college level too. So how have you changed as a result of this? I know the students are better off. They've learned about their ethnicity, and they've learned about the history of art, and they've developed an appreciation for art and dance, and they've developed technique. But how have you changed in becoming a teacher?
So I'm coming from the standpoint of being a freelance dancer before, working with a director, working closely with the dance company, preparing the dancers for what they need, looking at the skills and the dances that we're going to be choreographing and making sure that they have the skills in their toolkit so that they're able to go out on stage and perform and execute at 100% the way that we envision it, right? So coming from that perspective, I never had all of these extra pedagogy styles or strategies in my pocket. So now I go back and I'm like, oh my goodness, I did so much incorrectly for so long. And now I apply everything that I've learned now to my classes that I prepare for the company. And it's like the path in which it's presented has changed. And even the way that they are open to what I'm saying has changed, or what I'm presenting to them.
So you feel yourself as
very effective,
as a skillful person, which you hadn't been before.
Yes.
And may it continue to happen.
Yeah.
And how about you?
With me, I was an intern first. Thanks to the university, Nick Salerno helped me get an internship, and I worked my student teaching portion as an intern. I feel like I was a little lost at first because I wasn't ready to teach. But within this time, throughout the summer, I was able to assess where I could improve. And then I applied everything that I learned from internship onto now. And I feel like I'm a lot more confident and prepared.
Mm-hmm. As a person.
as a person and as a teacher.
Yes, isn't that a wonderful feeling?
Yes.
And again, I both Dr. Neumann and I can assure you, you'll continue to learn, you'll continue to grow. And I want to thank the three of you for joining us. Dr. Neumann for preparing such excellent graduates as a part of the team of Cal Poly Pomona, which is many professors and folks out in the school districts working together. And thank you for entering our profession and making a difference in the world.
Thank you.
Thank you.